so firstly a little bit of background to why I'm standing here. This is a timeline of the work that we have done. So in 2002, my father, James Fearnley, who's sitting there, forms a company with the primary aim to research and develop apiceuticals, i.e. bee medicines. And we did this under the Bee Vital brand, which is a commercial company we have. In 2004, we got a grant from the UK government, and this allowed us to set up a partnership with Strathclyde University in Glasgow. Since then, we've published numerous peer-reviewed papers showing lots of different aspects of activity of propolis in particular, including showing a link between different biological activity and geographic regions. I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a moment. The thing that stimulated the interest in Africa was a paper that we published showing a link between African propolis and its potential effect against human sleeping sickness. So again, we're looking at a geographic link between the two things. So in 2011, we established the Apiceutical Research Centre as a not-for-profit educational organisation which was focused on understanding apiceuticals, bee medicines, and also looking at ways in which we can develop sustainable beekeeping. In 2014, we conceived of the Bee Farmer Africa project, and last year in 2016, I completed some brief research in 5 African countries, and that's what I'd like to just talk about now. So I mentioned we use this word apiceuticals. We're trying to get people to use it. Obviously everyone's heard of pharmaceuticals, and now you have nutraceuticals. So our idea is that hopefully we can get this word apiceuticals to enter the language so that people understand that there are really important medicines that we can get from bee products. So there's research that's grown up over many years, but especially in the last 30 years, we've seen a huge body of research showing the different chemical and pharmacological properties of propolis. And I've just listed there some of the universities that we've partnered with in terms of doing some of this research into primarily propolis, but also other bee products. So this is the Apiceutical Research Centre, not yet built, but hopefully will be sometime soon in the future. And this will be a place where all of these ideas around learning and sustainable beekeeping can find a home. And that will hopefully be in the UK, in North Yorkshire, where we're from. So the purpose of the Apiceutical Research Centre is very simple: to research, inform, educate and promote apiceuticals and natural beekeeping. So I've just picked out a few papers that we produced in conjunction with Dr. Dave Watson and others up at Strathclyde University in Scotland. And all these papers are starting to develop this idea between the relationship between the geography and the biological activity of propolis. So you can see there's a paper on Pacific propolis and its activity against MRSA. There's a paper there on African propolis and its anti-trypanosome activity. So just to kind of really simply encapsulate this idea, what we're starting to discover is that it's very much the case that the bees appear to be collecting resins from plants and trees in that area that have a relevance for their health. And also, by extension, it appears that the products from those bees have a relevance to human health in that area as well. So the Bee Farmer Africa project was building on this research, looking at different types of African propolis and what it can be used for. In particular, this anti-trypanosome found in Cameroonian propolis, which really got us thinking, wow, maybe there are other types of propolis out here that can be used for different conditions. So the basic idea is to work together to develop honeybee-derived medicines that can be used for some of the most intractable diseases in Africa, and also to stimulate and support sustainable beekeeping for social and economic development. So there's 3 key diseases that we were interested in because of the research, and they're all protozoa-based diseases. So there's obviously malaria that everybody's heard of. There's leishmania, which is actually the second biggest parasitic killer after malaria. And then we have trypanosomiasis, which is African sleeping sickness. And they all operate through this protozoan vector. So we decided we were going to try and explore Africa in terms of these things that we've spoken about so far. And I was lucky enough to receive a travelling fellowship from the Winston Churchill Memorial Trust, which is a funding organisation in the UK that allows people to go overseas and learn and bring back the information to the UK. And the project was a fairly small project. It was just based on 5 different countries: Cameroon, Nigeria, Malawi, Tanzania, and Zambia. And the main areas of inquiry were trying to tease out the issues, to find out the existing nature of beekeeping and its relation to the health in those countries, but also the potential role for beekeeping as a healthcare resource, but also as an economic resource. Now, the research that I did was based on a questionnaire, and I interviewed beekeepers, development practitioners, people who have bee product companies, and health promotion agencies, but mainly it was focused around the beekeepers and the local communities, and tried to understand what their practices were and how they could be utilised. So here's a brief hive graph showing the types of hives that were being used in the different countries. So you can see there's a variety there. Top bar hives are the most often used, I think mainly because of their ease, and it's a technology that's been adapted in a lot of these countries, and it's proven to be very appropriate to a lot of the situations there. So in terms of what people were collecting from the hive, we found it was primarily honey, which was no great surprise, and then also wax. And there was very little propolis or pollen or anything else being collected. And when we looked at the economics of it, we could see that the average price for bee products was kind of inverse to what was being collected. So the honey and the wax was a relatively low price in the market. Things like pollen and propolis could potentially fetch a much larger price on the open market. So the interesting thing was the high value products were being left and the low value products were being harvested. And I'll go into a bit more detail about why that might have been in the later slides. So to summarize in terms of the practices in these African countries, it was traditionally practiced by men, although there were some women being encouraged through specific programs to try and increase participation. It wasn't a particularly popular activity. There was lots of barriers in terms of fear, in terms of a lack of knowledge of bee product values and how to get your products out there. One thing I did notice was that the bee populations were generally very healthy, very resilient. They weren't really treated, but they were highly defensive. And as some other talks have mentioned, they were prone to absconding quite easily. As mentioned before, there were the main techniques for the top bar hives, but then there was also people using log hives, clay pot hives, other improvised structures, and also the wild harvesting and honey hunting. I found, like, in the countries I went, there was nothing that wouldn't get used as a beehive. If it fulfilled the basic functions, then it would get used. So it was really about people adapting to what they had at hand. And as I mentioned, the products harvested were honey and wax. So when I was trying to find out what the key challenges were for those people, there was a number of responses. But the main issues for beekeepers in these countries were equipment, first and foremost, hive health, market for products and training. They were the kind of key issues that kept on coming up again and again. And the equipment thing, that could be something as complex as a honey spinner to actually extract the honey from the comb, or it could be as simple as a plastic bucket, depending on the situation. So it really had a vast range. And obviously, because the bees are so defensive, all the protective equipment in terms of the bee suits is very important to actually get people to take the step of keeping bees and looking after them. So to summarize, in terms of the challenges for the beekeepers, we had some environmental challenges. There was several pests, including varroa, lizards, wax moth, honey badger. That came up again and again, that they were really voracious honey hunters, the honey badgers. And of course humans as well. There was a lot of intentional fire setting. There was people stealing the honey, and just destruction of the hives because they were scared of the bees as well. There was also chemical issues in terms of increased use of pesticide. As some of these countries get opened up to sort of commerce and trade, and big chemical companies coming in, there's obviously an opportunity for the farmers to try and increase their yields, and they think that pesticides will do it. So that's starting to become a big problem. In terms of the more practical and developmental issues, it was really about access to training and equipment, ongoing support, and also the ongoing management of the cooperatives and the processing organizations. And finally, really key was actually a stable and reliable market for the products. I'll go on to that in a bit more detail. So quickly, just to look at propolis, because that's what we're really interested in as a sort of organization. We found that a lot of the beekeepers understood how propolis was being used by the bees in the hive, but not necessarily how it could be used by humans. There weren't that many people collecting propolis, but there were a few. Generally it just got left, or it was seen as a nuisance. And then in terms of the wider community and their understanding of bee products and medicinal application of bee products, there was really very little awareness around propolis as a medicinal product, and a little bit of awareness around how honey could be used. But the specialist knowledge about propolis in particular, that seemed to be contained within the beekeepers, and then maybe the traditional leaders in that community as well. They were quite defensive about containing that knowledge, because that was obviously part of their kind of business model. So when I managed to speak to people who were collecting propolis and using it medicinally, there was three things that kept on coming up in terms of the uses, and they were toothache and oral health, stomach complaints, and wound healing. So that actually mirrors a lot of the research that's been done in lots of so-called advanced countries. What we were also trying to do, going back to this idea of the geographic relevance, was to see if we could draw out the link, tease out some of these ideas of what's going on disease-wise in an area, what's happening with the plants in that area, and therefore what's the propolis going to be like, and what are the bees doing with the plant resins and the pollen. So we found that there was a huge amount of people who used plants as medicine. It was very widespread. And the common complaints where plants were used for treatment were these top four. So we had people treating malaria with artemisia, neem, fever grass, papaya leaves, aloe, sort of less serious things like diarrhea, they were treating with mango, and then there was wound healing and sterilizing, they were using what they call African iodine. And respiratory conditions would get treated with mango root and blue gum leaves. So there was a lot of different disease issues in the areas that I visited, both communicable and non-communicable diseases. And often plants would be used out of necessity. Orthodox medicine was either not available, too expensive, and so often the plant was the first port of call in terms of healthcare. So I just want to briefly explain this case study because I thought it was a project that showed us how things could work if you managed to address some of the issues that people were facing in these countries. So this was a case study in Nigeria. It was a private honey company that had partnered up with USAID, and they were delivering training and mentoring. And the idea was that they were trying to kind of eliminate a lot of the risk for people in taking that step and becoming a beekeeper. So what they were trying to do was eliminate the risk and then increase the uptake and retention of beekeepers. And in that way they would then actually maintain their own supply for their own business model. So the key things that they focused on were initially providing training, but then ongoing mentoring support, providing professional beekeeping equipment. So this was done on a sort of buyback system, so they didn't have to pay anything up front. It was kind of loan, but then they would pay back through the harvest. And that harvest, it was very simple. It was they would come and collect all the honey and the wax all in one go, in big pots, at a pre-agreed, guaranteed price. So they knew they had a market for their products. There was no question over that. And this particular project, using this model, had managed to train over 750 beekeepers across 5 Nigerian states. And I saw it working in action, and it seemed to be dealing with a lot of those issues that were barriers to it. So in terms of opportunities, I'll just quickly whiz through these because there are so many extra opportunities that kind of flow out of this activity as far as I understand it. So for beekeepers and farmers, they can increase their cash crops, they can start to harvest some of these higher valued cash crops from the beehive. They can also encourage natural pollination, which is going to increase the fruit and vegetable yield. Often the farmers will be farming fruit and vegetables at the same time as keeping bees, so it's a kind of symbiotic relationship that will help the wider community. And it's also going to be an access to cheap natural sources of food in terms of honey and pollen, but also medicines in terms of propolis, bee venom, honey and pollen. I saw a lot of people actually self-administering bee venom for arthritis, and it seems to be working for them.
I would like you to sum it up, please.
Sum it up, okay. Okay, so we'll skip on. In terms of the bee product companies, they can secure their supply and it becomes a self-sustaining business by creating the local co-ops. And now I will have to try and whiz through these very quickly. So just briefly in conclusion, there's lots of challenges there, but although this was a very limited project and it was more of a kind of snapshot of different countries and what people are up to in those different countries, I think it really kind of planted the seed that there is definitely opportunity to build on this. There's definitely opportunity to promote beekeeping as a tool for sustainable health and economic development in Africa, but also to try and tie in this aspect of medicinal bee products that could potentially become a very valuable revenue stream for these beekeepers as well once they're trained up. So just briefly, back in the UK, we're actually testing a lot of the samples we got from Africa. We're collaborating with the University of York to start looking at testing against Leishmania species. We're planning further trips to Africa, and we're building an international academic consortium. I thank you very much for listening, and one of the things I did want to mention is that we, as the Apiceutical Research Centre, in conjunction with several other academics, have put together a propolis-based conference in Bulgaria in Sofia in 2018, and we'd be more than happy to see all of you there. And if anyone wants any more information, come and see me after this talk. And I welcome any brief questions, and I'm sorry for overrunning.
No, thanks a lot for your talk. Before going into the questions, I would like to ask if Abraham Ardoansa Alte is here. All right. Okay. So why don't we finish? And if you have any questions to Hugo, why don't you use the break time to discuss your questions? Thanks a lot.
Thank you.